So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, what city are you in right now? And what time is it? I want to imagine the exact setting as you listen to this. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Feel the hum settle around you, a gentle reminder that the night is ours to explore. In just a moment, we'll step together into the shadowed world of Agatha Christie's The Murder on the Links, where every whisper and twitch of the wind might conceal a secret. Picture yourself standing on the edge of a windswept golf course, the sea's distant roar echoing through the dunes. Breathe in the salty air, let the anticipation coil softly in your chest, and allow your senses to awaken to the hush before the storm. Already the pieces of this deadly puzzle are shifting into place. So get comfortable, sink in, and let's begin tonight's journey into mystery.
The first light of dawn seeps over the broad curve of the Mississippi, turning fog into pale gold. Wooden docks stretch like outstretched arms, half submerged in the curling mist. Fishermen, bundled in wool caps and patched coats, stand knee-deep in shallow waters, hauling nets glistening with last night's catch. Their silhouettes blur into the haze, voices low, as if afraid to shatter the fragile hush. A steamboat's distant whistle floats through the damp air, a promise of commerce and connection. Merchants begin sweeping their stalls on the river road. A woman in a faded bonnet scrubs the steps of a pillared storefront, her broom bristles whispering against the boards. A boy opens the shutters of a general store, sneezing as dust mingles with morning moisture. Above, a lone heron lifts off a piling, wings splayed, skimming the surface in silent grace. This is Dawson's Landing at daybreak, a place suspended between the steady pulse of the river and the quiet stirrings of human endeavor. Here on these docks and dirt streets, unsuspected dramas will soon unfold, and the town's fate will hinge on the keen eye of one overlooked stranger. The stagecoach's wheels crunch on the dusty main street as David Wilson steps down into Dawson's Landing. He carries a leather-bound satchel slung across his shoulder and wears a modest dark coat, its fabric worn but neatly pressed. His round spectacles catch the dawn light, revealing eyes wide with curiosity. He pauses, hand resting on the doorframe of the small post office, surveying the clapboard buildings that line the street. A stray dog scampers by, sniffing at a fallen apple. A cluster of children playing nearby pauses to stare at the newcomer. Wilson tucks a loose strand of hair behind his ear, then lifts his chin and takes a step toward the river. His posture is straight, deliberate, as though each movement has been measured against some internal standard. Townsfolk glance up from their chores, cattle herding, water drawing, shutter painting, some with polite interest, others with barely concealed skepticism. In that moment, Wilson is both an outsider and a potential catalyst. He carries books in his satchel and questions in his mind. Soon, his words and deeds will send ripples through the social pond of Dawson's Landing, unsettling assumptions no one yet realizes they hold.
At the door of Judge Driscoll's parlor, Wilson offers his hand out of polite habit. He speaks lightly of palmistry, the patterns of lifelines and fate lines, the twists of the head and heart lines. To him, it's an intellectual curiosity. To the assembled townsfolk, it sounds like folly. A dame in a lace shawl laughs behind a gloved hand. "What use have we for reading palms?" a burly merchant, his boots planted firmly on the threshold. Children, in point, weaving around Wilson's feet as he withdraws his hand with a half-smile. His voice remains calm, explaining the logic of ridges and loops, but the crowd's amusement swells into open mockery. Someone shouts, "Pudd'nhead!" A jibe born not of malice, but of genuine confusion. Wilson's cheeks color slightly, but he straightens his coat and offers a small bow. In that moment, the nickname sticks, carried on laughter and gossip. Yet beneath the laughter, a spark of discomfort blooms. For the first time, Wilson senses that the sharpest judgments often come from those least inclined to question their own. By midday, the nickname Pudd'nhead echoes from shop to shop. At the blacksmith's forge, sparks fly as the smith murmurs the name under his breath. In the general store, chatter over barrels of flour and bolts of cloth pauses when the name drifts past the door. Wilson hears it from behind, low whispers in the bakery, gossip on the riverbank. Each repetition nails the label deeper, like a hammer forging iron. He tries in vain to correct them. "It's Wilson, sir," but the title clings stubbornly. Even children chant it as they chase a hoop down the street. His satchel grows heavier with the weight of communal misunderstanding. And yet, as afternoon sun slants through dusty windows, a curious pride stirs within him. If people care enough to name him, perhaps they're paying more attention than they admit. Still, the sting of condescension lingers, shaping his resolve to prove that Pudd'nhead holds far more insight than mere jests suggest. Evening brings Wilson an unexpected dinner invitation to Judge Driscoll's stately home. The drawing room glows with candlelight, crystal chandeliers, and polished mahogany. Ladies in silk gowns rustle as they settle onto velvet chairs. Gentlemen in dark coats and cravats stand near the fireplace, discussing politics and local affairs. Wilson enters with measured steps, palms discreetly clasped before him. He surveys the long table set with gleaming silverware, the very utensils he overheard the judge guard so jealously. As he takes his seat beside the judge's daughter, a hush falls. Conversation resumes in polite, curious tones. Thoughtful. Where did you come from? Curious. What is your profession? Wilson answers with quiet confidence, his words precise and thoughtful, drawing nods from some and raised brows from others. A platter of roasted quail and garden vegetables circles the table. Wilson tastes each bite with attentiveness, as though cataloging flavors like the ridges on a fingerprint. By dessert, the nickname Pudd'nhead surfaces, this time accompanied by courtesy rather than ridicule. In that moment, Wilson senses that his standing in Dawson's Landing may be more malleable than he first feared. At dawn's return to brightness, Roxy moves through the kitchen with practiced efficiency. Enslaved cook to the Driscoll household, she wears a simple cotton dress and apron, her hair tied back beneath a kerchief. The hearth's embers glow beneath a cast iron pot. Steam curls upward as she stirs a bubbling stew of cornmeal and wild greens. Her hands are strong and sure, though her eyes betray a tired vigilance. She navigates around barrels of flour and stacks of plates, pausing to wipe a bead of sweat from her brow. Outside, the laughter of children and the distant clatter of dishes in the dining room mingle. Roxy's thoughts drift toward her own infant asleep in the quarters, heart tightening at the memory of last night's stolen lullaby. She straightens her spine and resumes her work, knowing that any hesitation could bring suspicion and punishment. Still, in every measured sweep of her spoon, there is resilience and quiet dignity, a promise that no matter what shadows descend, her strength will endure. Meanwhile, young Tom Driscoll roams the riverbank with restless energy. Clad in a linen shirt and breeches rolled at the knee, he wades into shallows, scooping up small stones to skip across glassy water. He glances back at his cousins, girls in cotton dresses, who, as he flicks mud their way. A group of neighborhood children chase him, echoing among the willows. Tom's straw hat lolls precariously as he leaps over a tangle of roots, his face bright with mischief. He dives under a fallen log, startling a squirrel into flight. For a boy born into privilege, this is his kingdom. Unbridled, sunlit, and alive with possibility. Yet beneath the laughter, there's a sharpened edge, a need to outdo, to prove himself, to command attention. Each prank carries a glint of rivalry, a glimpse of the entitlement that will one day cloud his better judgments. As dusk nears, Tom pauses, bending to trace a pattern in the sand, unaware that similar markings will soon lead to far graver stakes. Back in his modest rented room, Wilson spreads clay tablets and ink bottles across a small writing table. His spectacles catch lamplight as he examines fingerprints impressed upon soft clay, a hobby he pursues with scholarly rigor. He leans close, tracing the ridges with a quill, annotating loops and arches in neat cursive. Outside the window, the sounds of dinner bells and distant laughter drift in, but Wilson's world narrows to these patterns. He dips his quill into ink and presses his own fingertip onto a white card, labeling it D. Wilson in precise letters. The quill, as he notes similarities between this print and one he found in Judge Driscoll's office earlier. His heart quickens.
Could these ridges serve as a unique signature for each individual? He lays out cards side by side, comparing minute differences. In that moment, a challenge forms in his mind to demonstrate the power of fingerprints. Unbeknownst to him, this obsession will soon thrust him from scholarly obscurity into the heart of Dawson's Landing's darkest mystery. As the sun dips low, the wharf bathes in amber light. Lanterns flicker along the pilings, casting long shadows across the wooden planks. Wharf hands haul crates from a docked steamboat, barrels of tobacco, bolts of cloth, sacks of coffee, their voices hushed with fatigue. Wilson leans against a rail, notebook in hand, capturing the scene. The way the lamplight dances on the water, the smell of river mud, mingled with coal smoke. A hushed rumor drifts through the workers. Silver spoons, stolen from Judge Driscoll's home. Whispers coil around the crates, passing from one pair of ears to another. Wilson's pen pauses mid-word as he lifts his head, scanning faces for tension. A young deckhand with sooty fingers crosses himself. An older man, in a tattered cap, shakes his head, eyes wary. The air thrums with unease. Tonight, the river seems to hold its breath. Wilson slips the notebook into his coat pocket, determined to trace this theft not through hearsay, but through the evidence hidden in plain sight. Night descends, like a velvet cloak, muffling the sounds of Dawson's Landing. Gas lamps gutter along the main street, their weak glow revealing deserted storefronts and shuttered windows. Wilson walks home, beneath a sky strewn with stars, each footstep echoing on the hard-packed earth. He passes the bakery, its oven cold, and the blacksmith's forge, now dark, save for embers smoldering in the hearth. A distant hound baying splits the hush. His satchel feels heavier. It holds maps, notes, and a single silver spoon wrapped in paper, evidence he borrowed from a friend. His mind races with possibilities, but the shadows around him feel alive. He glances over his shoulder at every turn, half expecting footsteps to follow. Reaching his rented room, he locks the door and lights a lone candle. In its flicker, the walls seem to close in, and the silence presses against his ears. Yet, beneath the fear, a thrill hums through him. Tomorrow, he will begin to unravel the tangled threads that bind this town's secrets, and risk everything in search of truth. Late at night, in the cramped quarters behind the Driscoll plantation house, Roxy cradles her newborn infant, heart pounding, with fear and love. Candlelight flickers against rough-hewn walls as she presses the baby to her chest, remembering her promise to protect him at all costs. Outside, the hush of slumbering fields furnishes the only sound. Roxy's mind races. Her master's plans for this child cannot be allowed to come to pass. With trembling fingers, she loosens the swaddling cloth around her baby and, steeling herself, lifts the Driscoll heir's cradle across the room. The infants lie almost identical, one dark-skinned, one fair. In a single breath, she swaps them, returning the Driscoll baby to its place and hiding her own in the shadows.
Tears blur her vision as she a blessing pressing her lips to his forehead. Each heartbeat echoes the enormity of her choice. She trades security for love, scandal for safety.
In the pale glow of dawn, she will step into the world again, forever bound to a secret no law or master's whip can reveal. The next morning, the Driscoll household awakes to sunlight pouring through plantation windows. Roxy emerges from the quarters with her infant cradled against her chest, heart hammering as she joins the nursemaid at the nursery door. The nursemaid greets her with a gentle nod, unaware that the two babies have traded places. Roxy's chest tightens as she steps forward, instructions she's memorized for the heir's care. Meanwhile, the Driscolls coo over the new child
dark curls and earnest eyes, believing him their own. In the servant yard, a curious hush follows Roxy's passage. Fellow enslaved workers glance toward her with unspoken questions. Roxy meets only their silent support, greeting them with a faint, knowing smile. Though the household believes order restored, fate's currents have shifted. 2 lives now sail under false colors. One child will grow amid privilege and ignorance, the other under toil and quiet grief. Neither will sense the bond that binds their futures, yet each thread will tug hard when the truth finally emerges.
Years pass, and Master's son Tom Driscoll blossoms into a confident young boy. In the grand parlor, Tom practices reading from a leather-bound primer, his posture erect and haughty. His hands are clean, nails trimmed, his hair brushed. He wears a tailored frock and polished shoes, signs of his privilege. Servants hover nearby, ready to fetch ink or straighten a stray lock. Tom's laughter rings as he interrupts lessons to chase a hoop across the lawn, garments fluttering behind him. His friends gather under the magnolia tree where they splash in a shallow creek. Tom teases and taunts playmates, reveling in the admiration of those around him. Unseen, Roxy tends to family chores, stealing glances at the boy she truly mothered. In her eyes, his every triumph and misstep carries a deeper ache. Yet she remains unseen, a shadow tethered to hope and longing. Meanwhile, the real Driscoll heir, living as Chambers, occupies worlds away, his true identity buried beneath layers of cotton and secrecy. In a small, dusty cabin at the edge of town, Chambers, actually the Driscoll heir, grows under Roxy's devoted care. His bright eyes mirror questions he cannot yet name. Why does he never dine in the big house? Why do other children mock his dark skin? Roxy sits beside him on a straw mat, teaching him letters scraped into the wood floor. She guides his small hand across each shape, whispering gentle praises. His clothing is threadbare but neat, his shoes scuffed. Outside, cicadas drone as he practices his alphabet over and over. At dusk, he gazes toward the distant mansion lights, clutching a rag doll Roxy made for him. In his dreams, he imagines a life of silk gowns and frolicking cousins. But morning light always brings chores in the fields and whispered derision. Though he lacks power, his heart holds a fierce spark, a longing to belong, to be seen, to claim a destiny unjustly denied him. Meanwhile, Wilson's rented parlor becomes a makeshift laboratory. He pins sheets of paper and fingerprint cards to the walls, each labeled with a name. Sunlight slants through the window, illuminating rows of ridges and whorls. Wilson invites skeptics, townspeople curious about his odd hobby, to observe as he presses their fingers onto ink and paper. His voice is steady as he explains that no 2 prints are alike, each a map of one's identity. Some guests frown, others nod, intrigued. Roxy, passing near his door on hushed errands for the judge, pauses to watch. Wilson's clear demonstrations dispel murmurs of witchcraft. He lifts a small jar containing clay tablets embossed with prints he collected from taverns and courts. His eyes sparkle with excitement. This method could prove every individual's uniqueness. As spectators disperse, Wilson jots notes in his leather journal, plotting how to refine his process. Unbeknownst to all, these lessons in palmistry will soon furnish the key to unraveling the town's deepest secret. Around the stone bakehouse, near the plantation's edge, flour-dusted workers whisper over rising dough and hot ovens. Word of Wilson's demonstrations mingles with news of the heir's unusual complexion. No one seems to connect the two. A burly baker leans against a flour sack, arms crossed. They say the judge's boy looks like some stranger, he mutters. A younger woman, her apron streaked with ash, nods, recalling the stolen silver rumor. Roxy sidles past, basket on her arm, feigning interest in fresh loaves. She hears snippets. He calls himself Pudd'nhead, but has more sense than half the town. They say fingerprints prove more than birthrights. Her heart quickens, but she keeps her gaze lowered. As workers pull hot loaves from the oven, she masks her tension with a polite nod. Each fragment of gossip is a stitch tightening around her secret. Yet, in the swirl of flour and chatter, hope flickers. Perhaps Wilson's findings will one day unbind the chains that bind her and her son.
Night falls as Roxy sits at her window, cradling a small lantern. The Driscoll mansion's silhouette looms in the distance, lit by a single window where lessons continue into the evening. She stares at the faint glow, recalling the nursery swap that set these events in motion. Her son sleeps a few feet away, breathing softly. Guilt and hope war within her. Will Wilson's palmistry bring justice or destruction? The cicada's chorus drifts up from the fields. Roxy lifts her lantern higher, peering toward the house, her fingers tracing a worn locket containing a faded portrait of her child. Each tick of the clock sharpens her resolve. She will protect him at any cost, even if it means confronting secrets that could shatter lives. As the lantern's flame wavers, she steels herself for the coming dawn, knowing that the quietest hearts often bear the loudest truths. At sunrise, Tom devises another prank. In the yard behind the big house, he lures young Chambers, unaware of his true identity, into a shallow puddle. With a quick shove, he sends the boy tumbling face first into muddy water. Laughter erupts as Tom and his friends scamper away, mud splattering their fine breeches. Chambers sputters, wiping filth from his eyes, cheeks burning with embarrassment. Roxy rushes out to help, her gentle hands steadying the boy. Tom pauses, amusement flickering into uncertainty as he watches the compassion in Roxy's eyes. For a brief moment, he senses the injustice of his jest, but pride pushes him on. As Chambers retreats to rinse off, Tom turns and bounds toward the house, straw hat askew, unaware that this simple cruelty will echo when identity lines blur and justice demands its reckoning.
Back in his study, Wilson's experiments advance. He unlocks a wooden chest filled with glassine envelopes, each holding an inked fingerprint card. Labeled D. Wilson, Judge Driscoll, Tom Driscoll, and others, they form a silent gallery of identities. He carefully lays them on a velvet cloth, comparing minutiae under a flickering oil lamp. Outside, the hush of night deepens. He unfurls a map of Dawson's Landing, marking each name beside its owner's address. His quill hovers as he contemplates connections, who crossed whose path, who shared whose prints. His pulse quickens. This archive could resolve the silver theft and expose the switched heirs. He consults his leather-bound journal, where observations swirl in neat margins. In the dawn light of his modest study, Wilson lays out freshly inked fingerprint cards on a broad oak table. Each card bears a single ridge pattern, loops, whorls, and arches in stark black against white. He leans in close, spectacles perched low on his nose, tracing the lines with a quill dipped in red ink to mark distinguishing features. The room is silent, save for the soft scratch of quill on paper and the occasional creak of floorboards. A gentle breeze stirs thin curtains, carrying the scent of the river. Wilson's journal rests open beside him, pages filled with dense notes comparing prints. His breath catches as he aligns a print taken from the stolen silver spoon with one from his growing collection. The match is unmistakable, identical minutiae etched in ink. He sits back, heart hammering, realizing he has uncovered undeniable proof. This moment crystallizes his belief that fingerprints are a science, and that tomorrow, in the public eye, they will speak louder than rumor or prejudice. In Judge Driscoll's parlor, a small gathering convenes for afternoon tea and intellectual sparring. Ladies in chiffon dresses and gentlemen in frock coats cluster around velvet settees. At center, Wilson stands before a folding screen, unrolling a large sheet bearing magnified prints. He explains the science of ridges and valleys with measured calm. A fashionable lady fans herself skeptically. Surely you don't claim these smudges can unmask a thief, she asks, voice laced with amusement. Wilson counters with logic, citing experiments from far-off cities. A lawyer in a dark suit strokes his beard, thoughtful, intrigued. Laughter and raised eyebrows punctuate each point and retort. Teacups clink as a servant refills porcelain. By the debate's end, skepticism has softened to curiosity. The salon's elite depart whispering of Wilson's audacity, and perhaps of a new era where human dignity rests not on birth, but on the ridges of a single finger. Back in chambers, Judge Driscoll examines a fingerprint card Wilson has pressed onto his desk. The judge's brow furrows as he studies the looping pattern. "You expect me to accept this in lieu of sworn testimony?" he asks. Wilson leans forward, voice steady. "My lord, science requires no oath but the truth of observation." A clerk hovers nearby, ready to take minutes. The judge ponders, then calls for a demonstration. He places his own finger on a clean sheet, then a smudged spoon. The two prints align perfectly. The judge's skepticism yields to wonder. He allows Wilson to bring his method before the county magistrate. In that moment, Wilson glimpses a shift, not merely in legal acceptance, but in society's readiness to blend reason with justice. As the judge nods, Wilson feels the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. To wield this discovery wisely, for every fingerprint carries a human story. In the servant quarters, Roxy pauses mid-chores as a tremor of news unfolds. Wilson's fingerprint evidence will be presented in court. A cold wave washes over her. Memories of the swapped infant surge to the surface. She grips the rough doorframe, breath catching as a servant girl passes by, humming obliviously. The candle in her hand gutters, as if echoing her fear. For a moment, she sways, knees buckling under the weight of dread and hope. She steadies herself against the wall, closing her eyes against tears. The truth, once safe in shadows, now threatens to emerge in the glare of public scrutiny. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of relief glimmers. Perhaps justice will free her son from a lifetime of hidden chains. Gathering strength, Roxy straightens her apron and moves forward, resolved to face whatever dawn brings. In the bustling town hall, villagers gather on wooden benches to witness Wilson's public demonstration. Sunlight streams through tall windows onto dust motes dancing in the air. Wilson, standing behind a makeshift lectern, holds up two plates, smeared with inked spoons. A hush falls as he presses each onto paper taped to the wall. The crowd leans forward. Merchants, farmers, plantation owners, faces etched with curiosity and doubt. He walks them through the process, clean finger, ink, press, and compare. Then he reveals the match linking the spoons to a suspect. A murmur ripples through the benches. Farmers in wide-brimmed hats exchange glances. A minister strokes his chin thoughtfully. Wilson's voice echoes in the hall. Science does not falter in the face of prejudice. As he concludes, applause breaks. Hesitant at first, then hearty. In that collective acknowledgement, Dawson's Landing inches toward a new understanding of truth's power. At the press in the back room of the local print shop, ink-stained hands roll a page into place. The presses clatter and churn, disgorging fresh broadsheets proclaiming Pudd'nhead Wilson's discovery, a new era for justice. In the cramped space, journeyman printers gather, reading aloud passages about fingerprint science and last night's demonstration. He matched the spoons to a local deckhand, one exclaims, eyes bright. Another shakes his head, quoting critics who call it palmistry by another name. Outside, citizens on their way to morning chores snatch copies, scanning headlines. Roxy, returning from errands, receives one folded under the baker's door. Her heart thumps as she smooths the paper, reading each word. News travels faster than gossip. The printed page gives Wilson's work permanence. Yet for Roxy, permanence is perilous. Every printed line edges her secret closer to exposure. She tucks the broadside beneath her shawl, moving on with measured steps, mind alight with fear and fragile hope. Tom Driscoll sits alone in his father's small study, crumpled newspaper broadsheet in hand. He rereads the account of Wilson's lecture and the courtroom demonstration. The lines about fingerprints and stolen silver stick in his mind. He glances at his polished shoes, remembering the muddy prank he played on Chambers. A knot tightens in his chest. His reflection peers back at him from the polished mahogany desk, unsettlingly foreign. He presses a finger to the article's printed smear, recalling how Wilson said each print is unique, a map of character. Thoughtful. For the first time, Tom questions his place in the world and the fairness he's taken for granted. The study's velvet drapes hang heavy around him, symbols of privilege now feeling like a cage. Tom folds the paper carefully, resolve hardening behind his eyes. He will uncover the truth, no matter where it leads. In the dusty archives of Dawson's Landing's small library, Wilson sifts through old ledgers and census records. Floor-to-ceiling shelves creak under the weight of bound volumes and parchment rolls. He fingers an aged entry, noting the birth dates of the Driscoll twins. 2 entries, born on the same day, to the same mother. His pulse quickens as he flips to the census pages. One child listed as Driscoll, the other as Chambers. Lips pressed thin, Wilson cross-references his fingerprint cards, eyes darting between pages. Faint candlelight from a nearby sconce casts dancing shadows on the spines. He realizes that official records, long buried, confirm the improbable swap. The knowledge settles like sediment in his mind. Each document, each print, now converges to reveal the truth. Wilson closes the ledger gently, determination in his gaze. Tomorrow, he will confront the facts in court and restore justice to 2 lives entwined by fate.
At twilight, Wilson returns to the wharf where his investigation began.
The river's surface glistens under lantern light as dockworkers finish unloading cargo. He seeks the deckhand whose print matched the silver spoon. Spotting him near a stack of crates, Wilson approaches with calm authority. The man, in a striped cap and soiled shirt, straightens at the sight of the notebook Wilson holds open to the matching prints. Wilson gently lays the card beside the man's own print on the notebook page. The deckhand's shoulders slump, eyes darting toward the looming steamboat. Murmuring an apology, he admits to finding the spoons abandoned on deck and stashing them for safekeeping, never intending harm. Wilson nods, absorbing the confession without triumph. He closes his notebook, offering a hand in thanks, as the deckhand shakes it with relief and shame mingled on his face. Their quiet exchange draws curious glances from the other workers. In that moment, Wilson's method vindicates not only facts, but human dignity. Late that night, Wilson studies the sole remaining clue. A torn glove found near the Driscoll nursery. Its leather is worn, and inside the cuff, a fingerprint smudged but discernible. He shines a candle on it, positioning the glove next to a card labeled Chambers. The ridges align perfectly. His heart hammers as he photographs the match with a primitive camera obscura he assembled. The image captures the print's whorls in stark contrast. He pins the photograph on his study wall beside census records and silver prints, a visual mosaic of evidence. A single tear of wax drips onto the glove, symbolizing the gravity of proof. Wilson slides on his gloves to handle the artifact, peering at the print as though reading a person's history. This solitary clue will unmask a hidden life and unshackle 2 intertwined destinies. He extinguishes the candle, confident that tomorrow's revelations will resound beyond Dawson's Landing.
The judge raises his gavel.
Let the record show that the child known as Chambers is the rightful heir. Silence hangs, then breaks into gasps and tearful embraces. Roxy clutches her son to her chest as the judge announces the restoration of his name and inheritance. Tom kneels beside his brother, voice choked. Forgive me. The courtroom erupts, some in cheers, others in stunned quiet. Wilson watches from the side, pride and humility mingling in his gaze. He understands that tonight, fingerprint science has reshaped lives and rewritten social bonds. Late that evening, the courthouse halls stand empty save for echoes. Wilson packs his journal and cards into a leather satchel, each item a testament to truth. He hesitates at the threshold, glancing back at the long benches, now vacant. Upstairs, the judge's chambers glow. Family reunited, forgiveness granted. Roxy and her son slip past Wilson without a word, their eyes shining with gratitude. Tom catches Wilson's gaze, nodding in silent thanks. Outside, lanterns sway in the night breeze as Wilson steps onto cobblestones. He breathes in deep. Justice served. Identities restored. Yet, he knows the river of change will continue to flow, carrying these lives into an uncertain tomorrow.
Early morning light filters through gauzy curtains in Judge Driscoll's parlor, illuminating the empty silver chest. Inside, only the velvet lining remains, its blue nap worn smooth. The judge's daughter, summoned by a frantic footman, flutters in, shoulders trembling. She presses a trembling hand to her lips as she surveys the vacant space where the prized family silver once gleamed. Word spreads to the kitchen. Plates clatter. Roxy freezes mid-stir. Outside, Wilson, on his way to the press, catches whisper of stolen and silver spoons. His journal leaps to mind, the spoon's prints. He pauses on the porch, dust motes dancing in the shaft of light. The judge's daughter rushes past him, sobbing, tears in her eyes. Shame, fear, and outrage mingle in the household air. In every corner of the house, from the drawing room to the servants' quarters, the theft reverberates, setting in motion a legal tempest that will come to hinge on the science of ridges and loops. As the sun dips to a copper hue, the Driscoll household gathers in the grand hall. Judge Driscoll, stern and resolute in his black frock coat, raises his voice, loudly. "Who among you will explain this betrayal?" Eyes dart across anxious faces, servants, family, and guests. His gaze fixes on Tom Driscoll, whose pale cheeks betray surprise and indignation. Indignant. "It cannot be one of our own," Tom declares, voice echoing off carved wood. Wilson stands at the periphery, ink-stained notebook in hand, ready to offer proof. Roxy's hands tremble as she carries tea, her heart pounding. A hush follows Tom's words, then muttering of discontent. The judge turns to Wilson, sternly. "Sir, what say you?" In that charged moment, the room holds its breath, poised between accusation and evidence. Wilson moves to the center of the hall, notebook open to the page bearing spoon prints. He speaks with calm authority. "These prints match those found on the silver." He spreads two prints side by side, one from the spoon, one from the suspect's finger. Gasps bloom around the room. Wilson's voice resonates. "No two fingerprints are alike." He demonstrates the ink and press method on a fresh page, inviting the room's skeptic to try it themselves. A hush turns to murmured fascination as a burly farmer tries and matches his print. The judge's daughter grips a column, jaw clenched. Even Tom watches, brow furrowed, as science wields clarity where suspicion once reigned. By the time Wilson finishes, the crowd's tide has shifted. Doubt yields to evidence, prejudice to wonder. In the hush that follows Wilson's demonstration, Roxy steps forward, apron stained with tears. She places shaking hands on the bench.
"Your Honor, I bear a confession."
The judge's stern gaze shifts to her, surprise rippling through the assembly. Roxy's voice quavers as she recounts the nursery swap from years past, her own child's fate entwined with the Driscoll heirs. Gasps and murmurs swirl. The judge's daughter buries her face in gilded hands. Even Wilson stands momentarily speechless. Roxy's courage breaks the town's silence. She is not merely a cook, but a mother's heart striving for justice. As her story unfolds, fraught with risk and love, the courtroom transforms into a crucible of empathy and outrage, poised to reshape every life present. Day breaks on the day of the trial. The courthouse steps teem with townsfolk, some supportive, some scornful. Inside, the courtroom is packed. Benches creak under the weight of spectators, each face etched with anticipation. Judge Driscoll presides from his elevated bench, gavel ready. Wilson stands at the defense table, notebook and cards arrayed. The prosecuting attorney paces, papers in hand, ready to challenge Roxy's testimony. Roxy herself stands at the witness stand, trembling but resolute. A hush falls as proceedings begin. The judge calls the case.
State versus unknown.
The framing of identities through science and confession hangs heavy in the air, each word echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Under the judge's directive, Wilson presents the key evidence: the torn glove print, silver spoon prints, and census records. He holds each up for all to see. The jury leans forward, eyes narrowed in concentration. The clerk copies the prints onto the record. Murmurs rise.
It's undeniable.
Even Tom's face pales. The judge's daughter fights back tears as the truth settles like dust on old beams. Wilson's voice resonates. Science does not lie. The courtroom hushes, as though the walls themselves absorb the moment. In the stark clarity of ridges and loops, prejudice falters, and justice takes shape.
Tom Driscoll stands behind the gallery rail, frozen. His polished shoes feel unsteady on the polished floor. He watches silently as Wilson lays out the final print, linking his identity to the chamber's child. The name he carried, the privileges he enjoyed, flicker like candlelight, then vanish. He presses a trembling hand to his chest as the weight of truth crashes upon him. Memories of pranks and laughter twist into guilt and remorse. The gallery's excited whispers swirl around him like wind, but Tom hears only the echo of his own heart. When his mother steps forward to embrace Roxy's child, Tom's shoulders slump, resolve shifting. In that silent shock, he glimpses the path to redemption and the enormity of his inherited privilege. Roxy's daughter, in tears, kneels beside her mother at the bench. She begs mercy for them both, her voice a trembling blend of hope and anguish. The judge's daughter, now bonded to the real chamber's heir, reaches down to clasp her hand, bridging worlds of privilege and servitude. The judge himself listens, gavel paused mid-air. The prosecuting attorney's stern posture softens. In the hush, compassion blooms. The community witnesses not a crime, but a mother's sacrifice. When the judge finally rules, granting freedom for Roxy's son and redefining the Driscoll inheritance, relief washes over the hall like rain. In the soft morning glow of the reopened town hall, Wilson prepares his last public address. Chairs are arranged in neat rows, and villagers file in, their faces a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. On a small stage, Wilson places fingerprint charts, census excerpts, and the torn glove proof on a polished table. He adjusts his spectacles, heart steady but full of emotion. Clearing his throat, he speaks of justice achieved and lives reclaimed, not by brute force, but by science and compassion. As he recounts the tale of the swapped heirs, he pauses to invite Roxy and the two boys onto the stage. Applause swells when they stand side by side, their faces reflecting relief and reconciliation. Wilson concludes with hope that Dawson's Landing will remember this moment as the day reason and empathy triumphed over prejudice. The crowd rises to their feet, a standing ovation echoing in the rafters. In that applause, Wilson feels both pride in his work and humility before the community's capacity for change. Later that afternoon, in Judge Driscoll's parlor, the two boys sit across from each other, Tom Driscoll and his true brother, now restored to his name and inheritance. The judge's daughter brings tea, pouring with gentle care. Tom fidgets, his formal coat feeling both familiar and foreign. His brother's simple shirt and earnest eyes remind him of childhood innocence now reclaimed. Their mother watches from a velvet settee, tears of joy and regret mingling on her cheeks. Tom reaches across the mahogany table, hesitating, then clasps his brother's hand. In that quiet gesture, a bridge of forgiveness forms between privilege and resilience. The room seems to breathe with relief. Guests murmur blessings. Servants pause in doorways to witness the moment. In their reunion, the family's fractured bonds mend,
made whole by truth, sorrow, and a shared future.
At sunset, Roxy stands on her cabin's modest porch. The day's labor is behind her. In her arms rests her son, his hair now brushed, his eyes bright with hope. She breathes deeply, the evening air carrying cicada song and distant laughter from the main street. Her coarse dress is faded but clean. Her apron, once stained by toil, now bears the scent of fresh linen. She rocks gently, whispering a lullaby that once soothed her as a child. The hush enfolding them feels sacred, a gift after years of fear and concealment. In the twilight glow, she lets herself smile, fully, for the first time in as long as she can remember. Justice may have been served in grand halls, but this moment, this simple peace, is her most profound victory. Under a starlit sky, Tom Driscoll stands alone on the riverbank, where he once skipped stones. His reflection ripples in the water, unsettled by a gentle breeze. He holds the silver spoon, returned to him as a symbol of remorse and restoration, palming its cool surface. Thoughts of privilege, pranks, and pain swirl in his mind. He kneels, placing the spoon on the sand, letting the tide lap at its edge, as if to cleanse his guilt. Tom closes his eyes and breathes in the night air, resolve hardening. He will dedicate his life to fairness, to using his inherited status for good. When he stands again, his silhouette is resolute against the moonlit river, a boy transformed into a man by truth's reckoning.
At the general store the next morning, townsfolk gather around a bulletin board where Wilson's final report is posted. Charts, census proof, and a public apology from Judge Driscoll. Farmers in suspenders, merchants in waistcoats, and children in sun-faded dresses read with rapt attention. Comments ripple. Remarkable. A new day for our town. Wilson arrives, bowing modestly as villagers extend hands in thanks. Even skeptics offer respectful nods. A group gathers to purchase printed copies of his report, voices low with admiration. The collective shift in attitude is palpable. Dawson's Landing no longer mocks Pudd'nhead, but honors his insight. As Wilson departs, a blacksmith pauses mid-hammer swing to salute him, while a schoolteacher slips him a small bouquet of wildflowers. The community's odd respect feels like a gentle current carrying him forward. In the judge's private study, post-trial, Judge Driscoll closes the door behind Wilson. The room smells of leather and old books. The judge removes his wig, running a hand through silver-streaked hair. "David," he says softly, "you have restored not only my family's honor, but my faith and justice." He extends a sealed parchment, an offer of appointment as Dawson's Landing's official fingerprint registrar, a role unimagined until now. Wilson's eyes widen at the gesture's significance. He accepts with humble thanks, knowing the work ahead will shape the town's future. As the judge clasps his shoulder in friendship, both men glimpse a new chapter, one built on the quiet triumph of truth over ignorance. Back at her cabin, Roxy sits at a wooden table tending to a small patch of vegetables sprouting in a wooden crate. Morning light streams through a window, illuminating green leaves and hopeful growth. Her son, now dressed in a clean shirt, helps water the plants. Roxy's hands move with gentle care, trowel turning soil, tiny seedlings straightened, water poured. Each action speaks of renewal. After years of hidden sorrow, she cultivates new life with less fear. She glances at her son's bright face, then out at the world beyond her window, imagining a future where he walks freely. In that quiet moment, hope takes root, fragile yet unbreakable. When the season turns, Wilson prepares to depart for broader pursuits. Polishing his satchel and gathering his journals by a worn desk, he pauses to lift a framed portrait of Dawson's Landing's riverfront, placing it into a leather case. Outside, a small crowd is gathered. Roxy and her son,
Tom and his family, the judge, and several townsfolk. Each offers a wave or handshake. Wilson steps onto the dusty road leading away from town, turning once to salute his friends. The morning sun gleams off the river behind him, a reminder of currents ever in motion. With a final nod, he adjusts his spectacles, shoulders squared, and walks toward a stagecoach parked under a sycamore. Though he leaves, his legacy remains imprinted in every fingerprint card and every life altered by his work.
As the stagecoach's wheels fade, Dawson's Landing stands hushed in midday heat. Main Street shutters are open, shops waiting for customers, benches polished by hurried goodbyes. A stray dog wanders between barrels and crates. The wharf's lanterns hang still, their wires silent. Yet in the quiet, echoes of yesterday's triumph resonate. Children skipping stones without fear of rumor. Merchants greeting Roxy by name. Farmers discussing fingerprint science alongside crop yields. The town breathes, transformed not by grand monuments, but by a tapestry of small changes. Each fingerprint, each story, woven into its fabric. In ghostly light, the streets seem to pulse with promise, awaiting the next chapter. At dusk, the riverbank bears fresh footprints, one set slender and small, another broad and strong. They lead to the water's edge, where ripples lap gently against sand. A single fingerprint card lies half buried nearby, edges curling under a soft breeze. Above, fireflies drift among tall grasses as a distant steamboat whistle echoes, a reminder of journeys begun and journeys yet to come. The sun dips below the horizon, staining the sky in rose and violet. In this quiet tableau, the story's truths settle. Identity is both delicate and enduring, a print left behind for those who seek it. The river flows on, carrying reeds, reflections, and the promise that every soul, no matter how overlooked, leaves a mark that time cannot wash away. And now, as our tale draws gently to a close, let us ease the tempo of our thoughts. Allow your breath to slow. Each inhale a soft gathering of peace. Each exhale a release of tension you no longer need. Picture the moon's silver light washing over the empty fairways, the echoes of footsteps fading into the sand. Imagine the gentle lull of distant waves, wrapping the Lynx estate in a tender embrace of sound. Every clue has been considered, every motive laid bare, and now even Poirot himself retires for rest. Feel the weight of intrigue dissolve into the night, leaving only a soft glow of satisfaction. Let your mind drift along that endless coastline, where mysteries sleep until dawn. You are safe here, cradled by the cool night air and the promise of new dreams. Soon, your eyelids will grow heavy, each pulse a quiet reminder that tomorrow's sun will rise gently, unhurried, bringing fresh light to fresh stories. But for now, surrender to this moment of calm. Let your imagination drift like a single cloud across a starlit sky. And as I whisper my final words, know that the world of Christie's mysteries waits patiently for your return. When you awaken, perhaps you'll carry a hint of tonight's secret hush into the new day. Good night, dear listener, and may your dreams be as serene as the moonlit lynx.